Good evening. It's exactly 7:37 p.m. in Dallas, Texas, on June 10th, 2021. I acknowledged earlier in the week that I understood that there was activity ongoing with the alleged Congress of the United States that was, I believed, connected to events that occurred last year, which was the 64th anniversary of very important information published in the Congressional Register following a time frame during which a number of actions were ongoing in the history of the United States. Among those activities that were ongoing at that time were congressional hearings regarding illegal lobbying by the gas and oil sector. The 65th anniversary of those congressional hearings are going on right now. The time frame during which the hearings began and commenced and concluded happened around this time, beginning of June, starting with announcements and preparation beginning in May and following up going through the month of June and even into the month of July, 65 years ago. Now, in some systematologies, 65 years is very important. As a matter of fact, in many paradigms, 65 years is the age for retirement. And indeed, concurrent events to that congressional hearing process also referenced information that I understood was part of a long term outlay connected to the American pension system, specifically involving military pension benefits. Now, I have done what I can to address this. As a matter of fact, I've even put into the realm of consideration a proclamation concerning a task force to actually investigate specifically the pension system in light of the fact that in the last several years there's actually been substantial congressional activity related to the pension system. There's also been state legislative activity connected to the pension system, but there has not been a significant amount of forthcomingness about the implications, and there's been highly illegal activities that have been allowed to be excused in the course of risk and speculation associated with the alleged pension system. In many ways, the pension system is being used to launder money and to finance acts that are not only crimes, but that are against international law and are actually justifications as a cause for war. Without the pension system and the speculation on the pension system, there may not be as much of a just cause for war. But nobody has thus far seen fit to be forthright about that. I've already acknowledged how in October of 2019, there was publication in the Guardian Unlimited of a series of articles that were talking about investment managers and the considerations having to do with climate change. Various things that were going to be forthcoming in the next couple of years. And with the references and the coverage at that time, I understood that there was a policy that was being undertaken concerning what was supposed to be an outroll on a form of pension system investments and or even speculation, almost as if they were going to create a sort of another level of gaming associated with pension obligation. I've already reported amply in the last several years how this has had disastrous consequences and is not actually addressing the actual needs of the pension system. On the contrary, what it has done is it has provided a justification for disinvestment in terms of the actual substantial structures needed for appropriate administration on a local level, and a justification in indulging vice and crime in the stead of actually working through and accomplishing necessary reforms or implementation of sound policy. There's been way too much leeway given to people abusing their public office in order to set up very high risk hedging for their own personal investment paradigms. And their abuse of office after they leave office is both proof as well as continuing crime. Not only that, but a failure to hold people in abuse of office accountable, including while they're in office, has been allowed to persist to this time. And unfortunately, it is something that has several decades worth of experience. We're seeing that unfold right now in our current political paradigm. Because I know that beginning on tonight and for the next 24 to 48 hours, I contend there's going to be a substantial period of clearing of a lot of highly illegal financial activity that thus far has not been forestalled or stopped. I've been remarking on it, and I've been doing what I can the entire week. We needed actual enforcement, and we needed actual interdiction to shut it down. Making derivative notices with some lower level risk identification as a token accomplishment, including in regards to alleged international law enforcement cooperation around organized crime, that is absolutely nothing comparable to what is actually needed, but I contend rather a form of risk insurance that the FBI and other alleged federal law enforcement agencies around the world who did agree to conspire with that are allowing to unfold. Please remember the announcement about the FBI and its cooperation around that data surveillance program was preceded by an acknowledgement by foreign heads of state regarding their understanding of how they had been spied on by the United States. These are allegations that have been outstanding for a considerable amount of time. But just because you were in political office and you were subjected to surveillance, illegal surveillance that attempted to blackmail you, does not mean you get to make a justification for subjecting your entire constituency to illegal expropriation so that they can make insurance to cover up for the criminals in order to protect your political position. That's exactly what I understand has been happening. I just reviewed information about what happened in Congress in May of 2008. One of the concerns I have is that international events, including international events associated with transitions in political office of other countries, but also in connection with the election strategies and campaign activities of heads of state in other countries, have been a part of a long-term hedging strategy that the United States has disabused. Not only in whatever could be alleged to be some sort of national security paradigm or counter strategy in order to protect the national defense of this country and our allies, but rather to allow for a situation of creating paradigms where they can frame dissidents within their own country and visit reprisal on people within the United States who are operating or engaging absolutely constitutionally and yet just do not want to conspire with crime or play into the existing patronage regime that prioritizes and agrees to cover up for pre-existing crime in order for us to be able to have access to the fruits of our own labors and our own political rights. This has been going on for a substantial period of time. I believe that evidence exists to demonstrate that not only were people in the United States and not only were people in other countries set up in this kind of nexus, but that it has had international ramifications. I have contended that part of what happened with the Affordable Care Act, and I have provided reports, and I have even attempted to address this through the judicial branch, was more of a capital outlay related to adjustments that were part of the 2008 banking bailout. And that people were being coerced or literally tormented into receiving alleged medical treatment, including for alleged mental illness, so that they could be cybernetically enhanced and or otherwise inculcated into the outroll of the digital economy. That also includes the development of the crypto economy, which I contend is in a very specific manner a form of attempted kickback or bribe, including to veterans that served during the Gulf War. Now we are where we are, and what I believe I have found is potentially evidentiary not only of other factors associated with how the judicial branch conspired to put a protection and or a form of social insurance on this kind of abuse of power, but that it's actually engaged in acts of sabotage that not only have impacted international travel and safety connected to international travel, but have engaged acts of terrorism against sovereign nations. If you allow for political corruption in your country to escalate and compound to the point where it compromises the safety of international travel because the corruption is predicated upon abusing systems such as satellite communications networks or digital currency networks that engage internationally, or actual modes of transportation that are dependent upon technologies that have been intentionally sabotaged because the processes for their development and assurance of safety were sabotaged themselves to cover up for crime. And then it ends up resulting in the deaths of innocent people, civilians engaging in their ordinary life from other countries, including when it comes to use of international air travel. I contend that's an act of terrorism. And if an actual country or nation state has specifically engaged in efforts to cover up for political corruption domestically to the point where it compounds into jeopardizing air safety in such a manner, then that is state-enabled and state-sponsored terrorism. It was not an act of war. It was not a police action. It is not justified under any national security legitimization. It is not an accident, and it was not a risk. There was indeed premeditation, and I believe what I found tonight absolutely demonstrates that is so. There were a number of federal efforts engaged that had to, at the time, have been understood to potentially have created a risk to international air traffic, including in connection with the use of broadband that was already itself being manipulated for ulterior motives that were never disclosed. That was also being manipulated for ulterior motives that were never disclosed in an intentional effort to torture people in the United States that were not willing to comply with a political paradigm that was unconstitutional. That's what I just saw. If it is true, which I contend it is, that certain people who had already been subjected to early phases of cybernetic enhancements were intentionally targeted prior to the implementation of the Affordable Care Act with a preparation of a period that was going to try to justify re-engineering them and their cybernetics under the auspices of healthcare. And in so doing, there was intentional fraud engaged that ended up compromising the manners in which those people biophysiologically were connected to ongoing processes, including ones involved with air traffic safety and or broadband access, either domestically or in connection with digital networks. Then we need to identify the culprits immediately, and they need to be brought to justice immediately. I personally have been witness to at least 3 acts of terrorism involving the downing of air passenger planes. These were premeditated acts of terrorism. They were only capable of being accomplished because of conspiracy in covering up the actual means by which they were accomplished. There's more than enough evidence to prove this claim. I understand at this period of time there is a proceeding internationally regarding another incident associated with air traffic safety. I personally was not witness to that direct incident. There were other incidents, however, that I was, and I believe the evidence I have found today justifies or backs up my claims concerning the methodology by which those other events occurred, and that the events associated with what is currently being discussed or what is currently being identified and for which there is an evidence proceeding in another country do fit into the pattern and do serve the purposes of the same political actors that have thus far co-conspired to commit and have covered up for the other incidents that have been addressed. I'm going to put this, I'm going to end this particular video right now. I am concerned that without any appropriate, mature, honest, accurate, authentic, legal, or constitutional action by any of the state actors within the United States or those that would or do consider themselves to be allies of the United States, that there is an imminent threat of a terrorist attack within the next 72 hours. It may even be shorter than the next 72 hours. I've done what I can in order to address whatever would be the material or causal factors of this particular event. But I also will assure you, whoever you are, it's not going to work any more than the last ones did. All it does at this point is accrue more evidence. Every time you do this, you risk the lives of your own people. You risk the lives of your own people. And what this lets us know is that you never represented us. You never were speaking on our behalf. You were never a member of our country. We're taking it back.